And for more on Japan's history, particularly its wartime history, we are joined in the Beijing studio by Mr. Yang Xiyu, who is the Senior Research Fellow from the China Institute of International Studies. In London, we have Dr. Christine Surak, who is a senior lecturer at the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. And also in Boston, we have Dr. Jim Walsh, Director of Security Studies Program with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Welcome to our program. First of all, I want to clarify to our viewers worldwide, we are not necessarily trying not to invite any Japanese panelists into this discussion. We tried a whole list of them, but we didn't in fact succeed in getting any of them onto today's program. Of course, they might have their different schedules and events to go to, but also it reflects in a way the difficulties of looking at history and debate about history even today. So on that point, let me go back to you. First of all, to Dr. Walsh. We understand this joint statement by 187 historians. Many of them are coming from the United States. Are they mainstream voices? Are their voices going to be heard by the American society? Or this is just some very minor event that's happening in the academic world and nobody gonna know about it?
Well, I think it's something in between. I don't expect this particular story to be driving the news cycle in the United States this week. There are lots of other things going on in Yemen and problems here at home in the U.S. So I think it'll be a story. I don't think it's going to be a dominating or major story. I think most Americans are of the view, I haven't seen the polling on this, but I think most Americans have the following view. Yes, Japan committed atrocities during World War II. Yes, they should apologize for that, or certainly they shouldn't rewrite the history books and hide that. But three, is the U.S. going to be out there hassling them every day about it? No. I mean, I think the average person thinks it's bad and they should do something, say they're sorry, but they aren't seized with it in a way that China and South Korea and other countries are seized with it.
Dr. Surak, do you think Japan would voluntarily to do that? Just say something and do something, quote unquote, if I could quote it just now, Dr. Walsh said. Is that going to happen, do you think, under the current political circumstances in Japan?
What we've seen with Abe in terms of his reaction on the anniversary of the end of the Pacific War has been very, very muted when it comes to apologies. His statements, for example, at Harvard when he was in the United States as well as before Congress would admit feelings of remorse, for example, but he's come away from or backed off from actually stating the Maruyama apology of 1995 in his own words. So when it comes to the actual anniversary of the 70th anniversary of the end of the war, I think we can expect that he will not come out with a very strong statement admitting a lot of problems of guilt and war crimes, etc.
Dr. Surak, when you said that, you expect him not necessarily going to take the steps as China and the South Koreans will expect him to do about the war history. Why do you think he's not going to take that step? After all, past the prime ministers of Japan have done so. Why is it so difficult for him to say exactly what the past prime ministers in Japan did? What is the difference now?
Well, it took a long time, first of all, for a prime minister of Japan to formally apologize for wartime aggression. It didn't come until 1995, when unusually a socialist prime minister was elected. While the LDP has been in power, it has indeed since 1995 reaffirmed that apology, but it's actually fairly rare for prime ministers to come out with statements as strong as Maruyama's. That said, Abe himself has a fairly strong nationalist bent. He's, since he's assumed office, he's been very much intent on revising the Constitution, and with that, Article 9, the very famous peace clause. He's also been trying to work very closely with the United States to bolster Japanese military power and those sorts of things as well, and also has done very little to pull the brakes on the revision of history textbooks in the schools. So all of this is part of a general, fairly nationalist package that Abe has brought.
From the Japanese perspective, it sounds very much nationalistic. However, Mr. Yang here in Beijing, from China's perspective, from South Koreans, North Koreans' perspective, and many of the Asian population here, this kind of political attitude, what kind of message do you think exactly it is to us?
Well, I think, let me put it this way. The issue of apology, either 1995 or the upcoming 70s benchmark, Asian people, Chinese people, Korean people pay special attention to the nature of the issue, say war crimes. Is it war crimes or not? That is the key issue. Relating to the key issue, some key words are the necessary mentioned, say, comfort women. I appreciate former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. She preferred using sex slavery and Nanjing massacre and the invasion and chemical weapons against Chinese people. So those key words and the phrase composed the war crimes based on the lots of facts. And unfortunately, since Abe Prime Minister tried every effort to avoid, to admit, if I cannot say deny, he tried to avoid to admit all the facts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Can China, South Korea together be able to bring the Abe administration to the place that you have just expected Japan to do, to use those specific phrases so that to showcase their attitude toward the war crimes, as you put it, during the Second World War? Can you do that?
Well, unfortunately, I cannot see the possibility.
Why
not? Because of the political position. Look, the 1995 statement was made by the Socialist Party. And in general, the Liberal Party is more right-wing oriented, especially since Abe. He firmly believed the so-called war crime was not fit to his ideology.
And now we have an even more complicated factor, Dr. Walsh. That is the Japan-U.S. military agreement, in a way, has been expanded, which allowed Japan to put its military forces in different parts of the world. Having said that, though, Dr. Walsh, many people ask this question. They want to ask this question to Washington. Some Japanese even consider the Yasukuni Shrine, which is hosting, in fact, some of the Class A war criminals during the Second World War in it, comparable to the Arlington Memorial on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. Some were also comparing the massacre that Japan did during the Second World War to some of the famous battles the Allied forces was fighting against the Nazi Germany. I wonder, from your perspective, how are Americans looking at this? How are American decision makers particularly look at these comparisons? Is it looking at it from a historically responsible perspective? Dr. Walsh.
Yeah, I do not think this is an issue that is high on the agenda of American policymakers in their relations with Japan. And I also think, I think Japan did engage in war crimes. I think most countries at war engage in war crimes. Certainly Japan's were on a vast scale in World War II. But most countries have things they're embarrassed about. Turkey this last week didn't want to talk about the Armenian genocide. Other countries have things they don't want to talk about. I think it's dangerous that hyper-nationalists, extreme nationalists, sort of continue to hold the flame, hold the candle for that racist ideology, and that's a problem. But I don't think American policymakers, they're focused on contemporary issues in U.S. Asia now. The naval disputes, the island disputes, the air-sea defense zones. That's what they're focused on. American policymakers are not focused on these other issues. And frankly, I think China and South Korea are not the best messengers here, right? In some ways, it's good that the historians are carrying that message, because if China says you're terrible because you're not admitting all your atrocities, that's just going to cause Japan to react negatively. So
All right.
I think it's an issue, but I don't think it's an issue that where China necessarily is going to be the most effective leader on this particular issue.
Okay, here's the thing, Mr. Yang, briefly from you. When historical issues are not being handled properly, as some say, will the current issues, as Dr. Walsh just mentioned, territorial disputes, security issues in the region, be able to achieve?
No, it's no way. Simply because some of the contemporary issues, like island disputes, stemmed from the historical invasion made by Japanese. In other words, without Japanese aggression, there won't be such a disputes between Chinese and Japanese and Korean and Japanese. So without the right position and the common position about history, it's very hard to address correctly to the current issues and the issue in future.
I see. Dr. Surak, you're an intellectual yourself in doing research about the area. How much impact really, let's just be frank here, will this 197 experts make in their open statement calling on Japan to apologize for its wartime crimes, particularly about sex slaves? How much impact will it really have? If not much, how are we going to look at the historical issues, particularly these years when you have a lot of chaotic situation going on in the same region? Dr. Surak.
Well, we certainly hope it has some impact. I mean, that was the reason for issuing the statement in the first place. But in terms of what policymakers have on their minds, it's usually not what academics in other countries are thinking about. That said, what I think is very important in talking about the historical issues underlying this is that these issues are actually, in terms of their politicization, fairly recent. The Senkaku Diaoyu Island dispute really emerged only in the past several years after the UNCLOS treaty made these islands financially very important. It was only after 1990 and the end of the Cold War that the comfort women issue became very important. And we also have to remember that one of the reasons why Japan has been very reluctant to face its wartime guilt, and I would agree that it's actually fairly rare for countries to do this. Germany indeed is the exception that proves the rule. But we also have to remember that the American Occupation Army was also very involved in making sure that the Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal came to an end very quickly, et cetera. So it's a complicated history that underlies all of these things, and we have to remember that it's not a single point in time that makes them important to the present. It's how they're reconfigured now as pertinent political issues.
I see. Mr. Yang, let me go back to you. Will other issues, quote unquote, comparable to the wartime atrocities Japan conducted during the Second World War, when they are not being resolved in the public sphere, and therefore Japan also has the excuse, quote unquote, to not to come out to talk about its own history?
Well,
is this the right analogy to you?
I don't think there could be find some comparable cases or examples. Japan's invasion on history is very unique. On China, on Asian neighboring country, is very unique. And
what do you mean by unique?
Well, firstly, the crimes were very unique, and secondly, the historical issues, historical crimes, closely linked with existing disputes, as I mentioned. So let's look. We have passed the 40th anniversary, 50th anniversary, but now we are going to the 70th. But why now so hard? Of course, every anniversary will be hard, but why now is much hotter than before? Because of two reasons. On one hand, on the historical issue, Japanese government rolling back from the previous position, and furthermore, on the other hand, they are exploring the new role of Japanese military forces in the region, in the globe. That reminds us the history of the invasion.
All right, let me go back to you, Dr. Walsh. We are having very limited time left, but let me have your opinion. What kind of responsible role, many people once again ask the United States that they should have in terms of recognize what happened in history in the region, in the Asia-Pacific region, and also in terms of the nature of its relations with Japan vis-a-vis the concerns of Japan's neighbors? Will U.S. only look at one direction while ignoring all of the other voices? It seems, some say, to be the case right now.
Well, I think it's worth remembering that the United States fought against Japan in World War II and suffered its own losses, right? So just like China, just like the others, we were against Japan. We have plenty of complaints about what happened during the war, as others will probably have complaints about us, dropping the atomic bomb, for example. But, you know, I don't think it's the U.S.'s business to wave its finger at Japan. This is largely a domestic issue. I think we can quietly encourage them to do this. Hopefully there will be progress and change. But I think this is one of those issues that the more you scream at them, the more reluctant they are to do anything. And I do think Abe is a nationalist, although I would say less nationalist than I feared. He's better than I thought he would be. It's going to take time. Unfortunately, it's going to take time.
All right, final words. One sentence if you can.